I'm on the HOA board. I told you, no food during turbulence. Are you deaf or just spoiled?
An HOA board member saw my 7-year-old daughter eating crackers during turbulence and completely lost her mind. She snatched the food right out of my child's hands, destroyed it, and screamed that my sick daughter was nothing but a spoiled brat. What this woman didn't know was that my daughter had just survived 18 months of brutal cancer treatment, and those crackers were literally the only food she could keep down without getting sick. I felt absolutely helpless, trapped at 30,000 feet with nowhere to go, and no way to protect my child. Then the cockpit door opened, and everything changed in ways I never could have imagined. Before you watch this full story, please comment below and let me know what country you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more amazing true stories that need to be heard. Merry Christmas to everyone. The overhead compartment rattled violently as Flight 847 bucked and jolted through another pocket of seriously rough air. Sarah clutched her daughter, Emma's small, fragile hand tightly, feeling those trembling little fingers squeeze back with desperate trust. At just 7 years old, Emma had already learned what real fear tasted like, bitter and metallic, just like the chemotherapy drugs that had ravaged her tiny body for the past 18 months. "Mommy, I'm scared," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the grinding, groaning sounds of the aeroplane engines straining against the turbulence. Sarah forced herself to smile, gently brushing back the thin, wispy strands of hair that had only recently begun growing back on her daughter's pale scalp. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're just going through some bumpy clouds, that's all. Remember what Dr. Peterson said, you're the bravest girl in the whole wide world." Emma nodded weakly, trying to be brave, but her hollow, tired eyes told a completely different story. The cancer had been officially declared in remission just 3 weeks ago. 3 miraculous, impossible weeks where Sarah had finally allowed herself to breathe again, to hope again, to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd actually survived this nightmare. This trip to Boston was supposed to be a celebration, a joyful occasion. It was Emma's chance to meet face-to-face with the specialist who had pioneered the innovative treatment protocol that had ultimately saved her life. A chance to say thank you in person. A chance to feel normal again, even if just for a few precious days. The plane lurched violently again, even harder this time. The seatbelt sign had been illuminated for 20 solid minutes now, and the flight attendants had all disappeared into their jump seats, their faces tight with that professional concern that made Sarah's stomach drop. The aircraft fell what felt like 50 feet before catching itself with a stomach-turning jolt. "I feel sick, Mommy," Emma whimpered, her face turning an even paler shade of white. Sarah's heart clenched painfully in her chest. Emma's stomach had become incredibly sensitive after months and months of aggressive treatment. The doctors had warned her repeatedly that nausea could strike at absolutely any time, triggered by stress, by movement, by anxiety, or sometimes by nothing at all. It was just part of their new reality. Sarah had packed everything she could think of that might help. Ginger candies, saltine crackers, bottles of water, and prescription anti-nausea medications. But the one thing Emma had specifically asked for, the one thing that seemed to comfort her most, was sitting in the bag at Sarah's feet. "Hold on, baby. I have your special crackers right here." Sarah reached down carefully, her fingers finding the paper bag that held Emma's favorite animal crackers. These weren't just any ordinary crackers from the grocery store. These were the special organic, allergen-free ones from that specialty health food store, 3 towns over, the only food Emma had been able to keep down during the absolute worst days of her treatment. They had become so much more than just food. They were a comfort item, a security blanket, a symbol of survival and hope. Sarah pulled out the small plastic container and opened it carefully. The sweet, gentle smell of vanilla and honey filled the small space between them. Emma's tired eyes lit up slightly, the first real spark of life Sarah had seen all day. "Here you go, sweetheart. Just take really small bites, okay? Nice and slow." Emma reached for a lion-shaped cracker with shaking fingers, bringing it slowly to her lips. Sarah watched her daughter with the intense focus of a hawk watching its nest, monitoring every swallow, every breath, every tiny flicker of expression. This was her life now, constant vigilance, endless worry, and a love so fierce and protective it physically hurt in her chest. The plane dropped suddenly again, and Emma gasped in fear, the cracker falling from her small hand onto the tray table in front of her. Tears spilt down her pale cheeks. "Mommy, I don't like this. I want to go home." "I know, baby. I know." Sarah wrapped her arm protectively around Emma's fragile shoulders, feeling the delicate bones beneath the soft pink sweater. "Just try to eat a little something, okay? It'll help settle your tummy." But before Emma could reach for another cracker, a sharp voice cut through the chaos of the struggling aircraft, and what happened next turned a difficult flight into an absolute nightmare. "Stay with me, because this Christmas season reminds us that sometimes the cruelest people get exactly what they deserve." But before Emma could reach for another cracker, a sharp, angry voice suddenly cut through the noise of the struggling aircraft. "Excuse me, excuse me." Sarah looked up in surprise to find a woman standing in the aisle right beside them. One of her hands was gripping the seat back for balance against the turbulence, while the other hand was pointing directly, accusingly at Emma's tray table. The woman was impeccably dressed in an expensive cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. Her silver hair was styled in a rigid, perfect bob that didn't move even a fraction despite the violent turbulence. Her face was pinched tight, with the kind of anger that comes from someone who genuinely believes the entire world owes them constant deference and obedience. "You need to put that away immediately," the woman snapped sharply, her voice carrying over several rows of seats. "Food is not allowed during turbulence. It's a serious safety hazard." Sarah blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry. What? Those crackers?" The woman jabbed her finger toward Emma's tray table with theatrical disgust, like she was pointing at something contaminated. "You're blatantly violating FAA regulations. As a member of the Oakwood Hills Homeowners Association Board, I know all about rules and compliance. This is completely unacceptable behavior." Sarah felt heat rising in her chest, anger beginning to build. "Ma'am, my daughter is sick. She needs to eat something to settle her stomach." "I don't care what your excuse is," the woman said coldly, her voice absolutely dripping with condescension. "Rules are rules. If we let everyone do whatever they want, we'd have complete chaos. I've been flying first class for 30 years, and I've never in my life seen such blatant disregard for proper protocol." Sarah glanced around quickly, noticing for the first time that they were seated in the last row of the first-class cabin seats. She had scraped together every last dollar she had to afford, so that Emma could have extra space and comfort for this important trip. The woman was seated 2 rows ahead, but had apparently made it her personal mission to police the entire cabin like some volunteer flight marshal. "Please," Sarah said, trying desperately to keep her voice steady and calm. "She's only 7 years old. She's been very sick. The crackers help her feel better." "Sick?" The woman's eyes narrowed with suspicion and judgment. "All the more reason to follow the rules properly. You should have thought about that before booking a flight. If she's too sick to fly without special accommodations, maybe she shouldn't be flying at all." She reached across Sarah's seat, her perfectly manicured fingers grabbing for the container of crackers. "Don't touch those." Sarah's voice came out sharper than she'd intended, protective instinct completely overriding politeness. But the woman was faster. Her fingers closed around the plastic container in one swift motion. "If you won't comply with regulations, I'll take care of it myself." What happened next seemed to occur in horrible slow motion. The plane hit another violent pocket of turbulence, throwing the woman completely off balance. She stumbled backwards into the aisle, and as she did, the container of crackers flew from her hand, scattering across the aisle floor in every direction. Emma let out a cry of genuine distress, reaching desperately toward her fallen crackers, even as the plane continued to shake and buck. "My crackers, Mommy, my crackers." Sarah lunged forward instinctively, trying to gather them up, trying to save what she could, but the woman stepped directly on the scattered crackers, grinding them into the carpet with the heel of her expensive designer shoe. The crunch of breaking crackers was barely audible over the engine noise, but to Sarah, it sounded exactly like bones breaking. "Now, look what you've done," the woman hissed, wiping her heel on the carpet with disgust, creating an even bigger mess. "Creating a disturbance during an emergency. I'm reporting you to the flight crew the moment we land." Emma's sobs grew louder and more desperate, her small body shaking. "Mommy, she broke my lions. She broke all my lions." Sarah felt something snap deep inside her. All the months of absolute terror of watching her daughter suffer through treatments that left her too weak even to walk, of sleeping in uncomfortable hospital chairs night after night, of learning medical terminology that no mother should ever have to know, of lying awake wondering if Emma would live to see her 8th birthday, all of it came rushing to the surface like a tidal wave. "Those were her crackers," Sarah said, her voice shaking with barely contained fury. "My daughter has been fighting leukemia for 18 months. Those crackers are literally the only thing she can keep down when she feels sick, and you just destroyed them like they were nothing." The woman's expression didn't change, didn't soften even slightly. "I don't care if she has the plague. Rules exist for a reason. Maybe if parents like you actually taught your children proper discipline instead of constantly coddling them, we wouldn't have such entitled brats running around everywhere." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Sarah felt hot tears burning in her eyes, felt her hands clenching into tight fists. Emma had gone completely quiet beside Hearth. That terrible, awful silence that meant she was shutting down completely, retreating into herself the way she had during the absolute worst days of her illness. "How dare you?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "How dare you call my daughter a brat? She's been through more pain and suffering than you could imagine. She's fought for her life every single day. And you think crackers during turbulence is the crisis here. I think parents who can't control their children are the real crisis." The woman shot back immediately. "And I think people who think they're special just because they're having a hard time are the real problem with society today. Everyone has problems. It doesn't make you exempt from basic rules and regulations." Sarah stood up, her body moving before her mind could stop it. She was shaking all over, not with fear, but with a rage so pure and righteous it felt like lightning running through her veins. "Get away from us. Get away from my daughter right now." The woman smirked, a cruel twist of her thin lips. "Or what? Will you make a scene? Go ahead. I have connections with this airline. One word from me and you'll be banned from flying with them ever again." Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, a flight attendant appeared, but whose side would she take? What happened next proved that sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places. "Ma'am, please return to your seat immediately." A flight attendant appeared seemingly out of nowhere, her face flushed as she fought to maintain her balance against the continuing turbulence. She looked back and forth between Sarah and the other woman, clearly trying to assess the situation and figure out what was happening quickly. "This woman assaulted my daughter's food," the woman declared loudly before Sarah could even open her mouth to explain. "And she's creating a serious disturbance during a safety situation. I want her removed from this flight immediately. Removed." Sarah's voice cracked with disbelief. "We're 30,000 feet in the air. And I didn't do anything except try to feed my sick child." The flight attendant held up both hands in a calming gesture. "Everyone needs to calm down and return to their seats right now. We're still experiencing severe turbulence. I am in my seat," the woman said primly. "It's this person who's completely out of control. She grabbed my daughter's crackers and threw them on the floor." Sarah protested desperately. "She called my 7-year-old daughter, who just finished cancer treatment, a spoiled brat." The flight attendant's eyes widened noticeably at the mention of cancer, and she looked at Emma, who was curled into a tight ball in her seat, crying silently. Her professional demeanor cracked just slightly, and Sarah could see compassion in her eyes. "Ma'am," she said to the other woman, her voice taking on a firmer edge, "I need you to return to your seat right now." "I absolutely will not," the woman said stubbornly. "Not until I have absolute assurance that this woman will be dealt with appropriately. Do you know who I am?" I'm Karen Whitmore. I serve on multiple community boards. I know the CEO of this airline personally. I don't care if you know the President of the United States," the flight attendant said, her voice taking on an even harder edge now. "You need to sit down, now." Karen's face flushed deep red with anger and humiliation. "This is absolutely outrageous. I will have your job for this insubordination." Another violent jolt shook the plane hard, and Karen stumbled, nearly falling directly into Sarah's lap. Sarah caught her instinctively, preventing her from falling and potentially getting hurt. But Karen jerked away, as if Sarah's touch was somehow contaminated. "Don't you dare touch me," Karen spat venomously. "I saw where your hands wore over those disgusting crackers on the floor." The flight attendant grabbed Karen's arm firmly. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to insist absolutely get your hands off me." Karen's voice rose to an actual shriek. "This is assault. The crew is physically assaulting me." Several passengers in nearby rows were watching now, their faces showing a mixture of concern, confusion, and growing disapproval, though it was becoming increasingly clear that their disapproval was directed at Karen, not at Sarah. Sarah wanted to disappear, wanted to protect Emma from this horrible scene, but there was literally nowhere to go. They were trapped at 30,000 feet with this woman who seemed to have absolutely no shred of human compassion. "Mommy," Emma's voice was so small, so broken and fragile. "Why is that lady so mean to us?" Sarah sank back into her seat, pulling Emma close against her chest. "I don't know, baby. Some people just are mean. There's no good reason for it." "But I wasn't being bad," Emma whispered against Sarah's chest, her voice muffled. "I just wanted my crackers. The ones that helped my tummy feel better." "I know, sweetheart. You weren't bad at all. Not even a little bit. You're perfect." Sarah kissed the top of Emma's head, feeling the fragile skull beneath her lips. She remembered all those long nights in the hospital when she had held this same head while Emma vomited violently from chemotherapy. At the same time, she cried from the pain of needles and procedures, while she asked questions that absolutely no child should ever have to ask. Why do I have to be sick? Will my hair ever grow back? Am I going to die? Mommy. The flight attendant was still trying to negotiate with Karen, who was now loudly demanding to speak directly to the pilot, insisting that she wouldn't move a single inch until Sarah was dealt with properly. The turbulence continued to rock the plane violently, and Sarah could see the flight attendant's patience wearing dangerously thin. "I'm calling the captain," the flight attendant finally said with clear frustration. Reaching for the phone mounted on the wall, Karen smiled triumphantly, vindication written all over her face. Good, he'll see reason. He'll understand the critical importance of maintaining order and following proper regulations. Sarah closed her eyes tightly, holding Emma even tighter against her chest. This was supposed to be a good trip, a healing trip, a celebration. Emma had been so excited to fly for the first time in her life. She had talked about it for weeks leading up to today. Sarah had shown her videos online, had patiently explained how everything worked, and had promised it would be an adventure they'd remember forever. And now this horrible woman had turned it into an absolute nightmare. "Attention, everyone. This is Captain Rodriguez speaking." The voice came over the intercom system, deep and remarkably calm, despite the chaos of the turbulence surrounding them. "As you've all noticed, we're experiencing some pretty significant weather right now. We're currently in contact with air traffic control and are working hard to find smoother air for everyone's comfort. In the meantime, I need everyone to remain seated with seatbelts securely fastened. This includes anyone currently standing in the aisles. Flight crew, please be seated as well." Sarah felt a small flicker of relief. Surely now Karen would have to sit down. Surely she'd have to obey a direct order from the captain himself. But Karen just crossed her arms defiantly across her chest. "I'm not moving until I speak with him directly, face to face." The flight attendant looked absolutely helpless, caught between regulations and an impossibly stubborn passenger. "Ma'am, the captain has given a direct order. Then he can come back here and tell me himself." The seconds ticked by in tense, uncomfortable silence. Sarah could feel Emma's heart racing against her side, could feel her daughter's anxiety building to dangerous levels. Emma had been doing so well with the stress management techniques the child psychologist had taught her, techniques designed to help her deal with the trauma of her illness and treatment. But this situation was beyond anything a 7-year-old should have to cope with, sick or healthy. Then, impossibly, the cockpit door opened. When that cockpit door opened, and the captain stepped out, I had no idea our entire lives were about to change. What he did next restored my faith in humanity, and this Christmas reminds us that heroes really do exist in the most unexpected places. A tall man in a crisp, professional pilot's uniform emerged from the cockpit, moving carefully but purposefully down the aisle, despite the continuing turbulence. His face was serious, his jaw set with determination. He had distinguished silver hair at his temples and dark, intelligent eyes that swept across the entire scene in seconds, taking in absolutely everything. Karen standing defiantly in the aisle, the flight attendant looking frazzled and helpless, Sarah holding her sobbing daughter, and the crushed crackers still scattered across the floor. "I'm Captain Rodriguez," he said, his voice carrying natural authority that instantly commanded respect. "Someone wants to tell me what's going on back here that's so important you're willing to risk safety during severe turbulence." Karen launched into her complaint immediately, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Captain, thank goodness you're here. This woman has been flagrantly violating safety protocols, feeding her child during dangerous turbulence, and, when I attempted to enforce the rules for everyone's safety reasonably, she became aggressive and threatening toward me. I demand that she be arrested the moment we land." Captain Rodriguez's eyes moved to Sarah, and she saw them taking in every detail, most thin frame, her scared face, the tears, everything. "Is this true?" Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. "My daughter was feeling sick from the turbulence. She has a very sensitive stomach from medical treatments. I gave her some crackers to help settle it." This woman took them from her hand and threw them on the floor. "Then she called my daughter a brat." "She's exaggerating wildly," Karen interjected quickly. "I was simply removing a safety hazard. Any responsible passenger would have done the same thing by grabbing food from a child's tray table during turbulence." The captain's voice was cool, controlled. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to return to your seat immediately. Not until this situation is properly resolved," Karen said stubbornly, drawing herself up to her full height. "I pay for first-class tickets specifically to avoid this exact kind of chaos and disorder. I have rights as a passenger." "Which you have," Captain Rodriguez said, his voice hardening noticeably. "Is about 30 seconds to sit down before I have you physically restrained for violating FAA regulations regarding crew orders during flight operations." Karen's mouth fell open in shock. "You can't be serious. You wouldn't dare." "I'm completely serious. You're actively interfering with crew duties during a safety situation. That's a federal offense, ma'am. I'm the one trying to enforce safety." Karen's voice rose hysterically. "These people are the problem here, not me." Captain Rodriguez held up one hand firmly. "I've heard enough." He turned to the flight attendant. "Maria, what actually happened here? Give me the facts." The flight attendant Mara straightened her posture. "Sir, I arrived to find this passenger." She gestured toward Karen, standing in the aisle during severe turbulence, arguing loudly with this passenger. She indicated Sarah. She had apparently taken crackers from the child and thrown them on the floor. "She's refused multiple direct orders to sit down. The child was eating during turbulence." Karen protested desperately. "There is no FAA regulation against eating during turbulence." Captain Rodriguez cut her off sharply. "None whatsoever. What there is a regulation against is standing in the aisle when the seatbelt sign is illuminated, interfering with other passengers and their belongings, and disobeying direct instructions from crew members." Karen's face went deathly pale, then flushed bright red. But everyone knows you're not supposed to." "You're not supposed to stand during turbulence," the captain said firmly, his voice like steel. "You're not supposed to reach across other passengers and take their belongings without permission. And you're especially not supposed to harass a sick child and her mother." He turned to Sarah, and his entire expression softened dramatically. "Ma'am, I sincerely apologize for what you and your daughter have experienced on this flight. Maria mentioned medical treatments. Can you tell me more?" Sarah nodded, tears spilling over despite her absolute best efforts to contain them. "Emma just finished 18 months of chemotherapy for leukemia. She's in remission now, thank God, but her stomach is still incredibly sensitive. The crackers ... they're the only thing that helps when she feels sick. They were her comfort food during treatment." Captain Rodriguez's jaw tightened visibly, and he looked at the crushed crackers scattered on the floor, then back at Karen with something that looked very much like controlled fury in his eyes. "You took crackers from a 7-year-old cancer patient and destroyed them," he said quietly, each word deliberate. "I didn't know," Karen stammered weakly. But there was absolutely no remorse in her voice, no genuine regret. She should have said something. She should have explained. She shouldn't have to announce her daughter's complete medical history to justify feeding her, the captain said coldly. "But even if this were a completely healthy child, with no medical issues whatsoever, your behavior would still be completely unacceptable." He knelt in the aisle right there, his pristine uniform getting dirty as he carefully, gently picked up the pieces of broken crackers, gathering them respectfully in his large hand. Emma watched him with wide, surprised eyes, not quite believing what she was seeing. Standing back up, Captain Rodriguez looked at the crushed crackers in his palm, then directly at Emma with kind eyes. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry this happened to you. No one should ever treat you that way." "No one," Emma sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her small hand. "She called me a brat." "You're not a brat," the captain said gently but firmly. "You're incredibly brave. I know a lot about brave people. I used to be a Navy pilot before I flew commercial airlines, and I can tell just by looking at you that you're one of the bravest people on this entire plane." "Really?" Emma's voice was tiny, but carried a hint of hope. "Really and truly." "Really and truly." Captain Rodriguez smiled at her, a genuine, warm smile that transformed his serious face. "In fact, I think you might be brave enough to help me fly this plane. What do you say? Would you like to visit the cockpit after we get through this rough weather?" Emma's eyes widened in amazement. "The cockpit? For real? For real? But first, let's take care of you properly." He turned to Maria. "Do we have any crackers in the galley? Any kind at all? I'll check right away, sir." "Good. And bring whatever drinks we have that might help settle a stomach. Ginger ale, if we have it. Anything gentle." He looked back at Karen, who was still standing frozen in the aisle, looking absolutely stunned by this turn of events. "As for you, ma'am, you have exactly 2 choices right now. You can return to your seat immediately and stay there for the entire remainder of this flight without saying another single word. Or, I can have the flight crew physically restrain you in your seat and have law enforcement waiting when we land to arrest you for interfering with a flight crew. Your choice. You have 5 seconds to decide." "This is discrimination," Karen blustered weakly, desperately. I'll sue you and this airline." "You're absolutely welcome to try," Captain Rodriguez said calmly. "In the meantime, make your choice. 5.4.3. Double quotes. Karen looked around desperately, perhaps hoping for support from other passengers, but she found only cold stares and slowly shaking heads. The woman sitting across the aisle from Sarah spoke up, her voice cutting and clear. "You should be absolutely ashamed of yourself, treating a sick child that way." Another passenger, an older gentleman, nodded firmly. "I've been watching this entire thing unfold. You're lucky the captain is giving you any choice at all. If it were up to me, you'd already be in handcuffs." Karen's face crumpled, but not with remorse or genuine regret, with humiliation and impotent rage. "Fine," she spat bitterly. "I'll sit down, but this isn't over. I know important people. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly how I was treated on this flight." "Please do," Captain Rodriguez said dryly. "I'm sure everyone will be very interested to hear how you bullied a cancer patient and her mother." Karen turned and stumbled back to her seat, her dignity in complete tatters. The plane hit another pocket of turbulence, and she fell heavily into her seat, fumbling clumsily with her seatbelt. Captain Rodriguez waited patiently until she was completely secured, then turned back to Sarah and Emma with a completely different expression: warm, caring, protective. I need to get back to the cockpit and fly this plane, but Maria is going to take excellent care of you both. And I absolutely meant what I said about that cockpit visit. After we land safely, I want to personally show Emma around and let her see where all the magic happens. Deal? Emma nodded eagerly, a small smile finally appearing on her tear-stained face. Deal. That's my brave girl. The captain squeezed Sarah's shoulder briefly, a gesture of support and understanding. Hang in there, Mom. You're doing great. You're exactly the kind of mother every child deserves. As the captain walked back to the cockpit, I realized that another person's kindness had completely overmatched one person's cruelty. But the story doesn't end there. What happened after we landed proved that sometimes good people really do win in the end. As Captain Rodriguez made his way carefully back to the cockpit, Maria returned with a basket overflowing with crackers, a can of ginger ale, and several small bottles of juice. She set them on Emma's tray table with the warmest, most genuine smile. Here you go, sweetie. Take whatever you want. As much as you want. Thank you, Emma whispered, reaching for a package of crackers with still shaking hands. Maria looked at Sarah with compassion in her eyes. I'm so sorry about what happened here. I should have intervened sooner. I should have been here faster. You came as soon as you could, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion and gratitude. Thank you so much for believing in us. Thank you for caring. Of course, I believed you, Maria said firmly. That woman was completely out of line from the very beginning. She glanced back at Karen, who was staring rigidly straight ahead, her face still flushed with anger and humiliation. Between you and me, Maria said quietly, leaning in closer. She's been complaining constantly since we boarded. The temperature was wrong. Her seat was too close to the bathroom. There were children on the plane. Nothing was good enough for her. Some people are just determined to be miserable and make everyone around them miserable, too. Sarah sighed deeply, exhaustion washing over her entire body. People like that, I'll just never understand them. Don't even try, Maria advised gently. Just focus on your beautiful, brave daughter. She's been through so much already. She deserves all the crackers and all the kindness in the entire world. Emma had managed to eat 2 crackers and was sipping the ginger ale very carefully, taking tiny sips. Color was slowly, gradually returning to her pale cheeks. Sarah felt some of the terrible tension in her chest finally begin to ease just slightly. How are you feeling now, baby? She asked softly. Better, Emma said quietly. My tummy doesn't hurt quite as much anymore. Good. That's so good, sweetheart. Sarah stroked Emma's hair tenderly, marveling as she always did at how incredibly soft it was, now like baby hair, fine and wispy. During the worst of the treatment, she had genuinely wondered if it would ever grow back at all. Now here it was, growing in slowly but surely, a miracle, a precious gift. The turbulence gradually began to ease up. The plane's movements became less violent, less frightening. The seatbelt sign remained illuminated, but the worst of the storm seemed to be passing. Sarah felt herself finally relaxing slightly, though she kept Emma pulled close against her side. From 2 rows ahead, Sarah could hear Karen on her cell phone, despite the clear announcement that all electronic devices should remain in airplane mode during the flight. Her voice was low, but unmistakably angry, clearly talking to someone about her outrageous treatment. I'm telling you, Barbara, it was pure discrimination. Complete discrimination. Just because that woman has some sob story about her daughter, she thinks she can break all the rules, and that Captain He was completely unprofessional, completely inappropriate. I'm going to file formal complaints with the airline, with the FAA, with everyone I can think of. Mark my words, this is not over. Not by a long shot. Emma tensed visibly at the sound of Karen's voice, and Sarah immediately rubbed her back soothingly. Don't listen to her, sweetheart. She can't hurt you anymore. She's just noise. Why is she so mad at us? Emma asked innocently. We didn't do anything bad to her. How do you explain cruelty to a child? How do you make sense of someone who looks at a 7-year-old cancer survivor and sees only an inconvenience, only a violation of their precious rules? Emma considered this thoughtfully, her young face serious beyond her years. Cancer had stolen so many things from her: her hair, her energy, her childhood innocence about her own mortality. But it had also given her a wisdom and understanding that most children never acquire. She understood suffering intimately. She understood pain, and because of that deep understanding, she would never want to inflict it on others. I'm never going to be mean like that lady, Emma declared with quiet determination. Even when I'm old like her, I'm going to be nice to everyone I meet. I'm going to be kind. You already are nice to everyone, Sarah said, kissing her forehead tenderly. You're honestly the nicest, kindest person I know. The rest of the flight passed quietly and peacefully. The turbulence diminished to just occasional gentle bumps, and the seatbelt sign finally turned off. Karen remained rigidly in her seat, her phone pressed to her ear for much of the remaining flight. Her voice a constant low drone of complaints and threats that eventually everyone learned to tune out. Other passengers made a point of stopping by Sarah and Emma's seats as they moved about the cabin, offering kind words, sincere apologies for what they had witnessed, and words of encouragement. An elderly woman with kind eyes gave Emma a small stuffed teddy bear she had bought at the airport gift shop. You're such a brave little girl, she said with tears in her eyes. A businessman in an expensive suit offered to buy them lunch at the airport. My daughter had cancer too, he said quietly. She's in remission now. I remember what those days were like. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number as they waited for their luggage. Mrs. Morrison, this is Maria from your flight. Captain Rodriguez asked me to tell you that a formal complaint has been filed against Karen Whitmore. He's also arranged for you and Emma to be upgraded to first class on your return flight, with complimentary snacks and whatever Emma needs. You both deserve to be treated like the VIPs you are. Maria Sarah showed Emma, who grinned. We get to fly first class again, but this time with nice people. This time with nice people, Sarah confirmed. They collected their bags and headed to the taxi stand. The specialist appointment wasn't until tomorrow, so tonight they would check into their hotel, order room service, and watch princess movies. They would make pillow forts and be silly and happy and alive. As they settled into the taxi, Emma rested her head on Sarah's shoulder. Mommy? Yes, sweetheart. Today was scary at first, but it ended up being the best day ever. I got to see the cockpit and meet the captain, and he was so nice. And that mean lady, she tried to ruin everything, but she couldn't. No, baby, she couldn't, Sarah agreed, watching the Boston skyline appear. Because some people try to bring darkness, but there are always more people who bring light, and the light always wins. She kissed Emma's head, breathing in her baby shampoo scent, feeling more grateful than words could express. That's exactly right. And you, my brave girl, are one of the brightest lights I know. The taxi driver glanced in the rearview mirror, smiling. You two headed somewhere special. Boston Children's Hospital, Sarah replied. My daughter is meeting the doctor who saved her life. Well, isn't that wonderful? The driver said warmly. Congratulations, young lady. You must be very strong. Emma sat up straighter, touching the pilot wings pinned to her jacket. I am strong. A real pilot told me so. 1 year later, Sarah and Emma returned to Boston for Emma's 1-year remission checkup. They flew on the same airline, seated in first class, an upgrade Captain Rodriguez had personally insured. This time, the flight was peaceful, joyful. The flight attendants remembered Emma's story. Other passengers smiled and waved, and when they landed, there was Captain Rodriguez himself, having requested to pilot their flight. Welcome back, Emma Bear, he said, giving her a high five. How's my favorite co-pilot? I'm doing great, Emma said. Her hair had grown back thick and curly. She'd gained weight. She was strong enough to walk without getting tired. She was thriving. As for Karen Whitmore, Sarah learned she'd been banned from the airline. Her complaint to the FAA had been dismissed after they reviewed the flight footage. But Sarah didn't take joy in that. She just hoped, like Emma had, that Karen would find whatever healing she needed to become kinder. Because in the end, that's what mattered. Not revenge, but the hope that everyone, even the cruelest among us, could learn and grow. This Christmas season, as Emma prepared to celebrate her second year of remission, Sarah reflected on that terrible, wonderful day. She thought about how so many people's kindness had overmatched one person's cruelty. She thought about Captain Rodriguez and Maria and all the passengers who had shown compassion. And she thought about her daughter, her miracle, her fighter, her light, who had taught everyone that the right response to cruelty wasn't more cruelty, but grace.